begin with the death of a world-renowned Canadian-born architect. Frank Gehry has died at the age of 96. Gehry died Friday in his home in Santa Monica following a brief respiratory illness. He is one of the most famous architects in the world and has won every major prize that architecture has to offer. The Toronto-born architect's first building in Canada was the Art Gallery of Ontario, and examples of his work are found all across the globe. Gehry transformed contemporary architecture through an innovative use of materials, design, and form. Among his many masterpieces are the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain, and the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. And a statement from the Art Gallery of Ontario, where Gehry designed the building's renovations, says, quote, Frank Gehry was not only the most important architect of the last half-century, he was also a great Canadian icon and literally transformed the AGO into the architectural masterpiece it is today. With me now is Alex Bozikovic, architecture critic with the Globe and Mail, who met Gehry numerous times while writing about his works. Alex, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Renee.
Can you start by giving us an insight into what Frank Gehry was like in person?
Well, he had a funny way of presenting himself in this very aw shucks manner. You know, he was just a regular guy, you know, but he was a complicated figure. By the time he became a famous architect, he was already in his 60s, had a whole career and a life behind him, and a very firmly held set of sort of aesthetic convictions. He had his way of doing things, you know, and was a very sophisticated artist who really wanted to take advantage of, you know, the opportunities he had to reshape the world. He was a little bashful about it. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to present a manifesto, but he had a very strong point of view.
And I just want to let our viewers know that we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with getting your image on screen, but we do have your voice, and really that's what matters here. We'll work on that, but I'll continue to ask you a little bit more about Frank Gehry. You followed his career, his projects. Which ones stand out to you as the most prominent?
Well, I mean, the Guggenheim Bilbao, which we're looking at right now, was the building that really made his career and sort of brought architecture into the public conversation at a time when it had been kind of, you know, a little bit overlooked, a little bit marginal. And Gehry managed to bring these sort of strong aesthetic possibilities and to do things like things a sculptor would do with form and light and space, and bring them into the world of big buildings that also, you know, serve these complex functions. And I think he challenged a lot of people to look freshly at the art of architecture and see what it could be as an art.
Do you have a personal favorite of his?
Well, for me, I mean, the building I have the closest connection with is the Art Gallery of Ontario, which, as you said in the intro, he renovated in 2008 and remade. I've spent a lot of time there, raised my kids there. And it really brings together a couple of things that Gehry did. One was to work with collage. He started his career, you know, bringing together, you know, sort of ordinary building materials and almost, you know, sort of found objects almost into buildings, right? Sort of pulling things together. And later in his career, he started to do these very complex sculptural forms. And the AGO has got a little bit of each. It is, you know, it is an assemblage, it is a collage of different things, but it also has these beautiful spaces. And like that staircase that we're looking at now, this sculpture essentially wrapped in wood that sits against and between, you know, the existing structure and works with it, and at the same time sort of works against it.
What kind of imprint or legacy does he leave in the world of architecture?
Well, Gehry was a really individual figure. You know, it's hard to say that there was a sort of a school of thought that he leaves behind because what he did was so particular. But, you know, he really did, as I had mentioned earlier, sort of open up the possibilities for architecture, show people once again that architecture could be an art. It didn't just have to be, you know, rational. It didn't just have to only do its job, but could also challenge people and could present different ways of thinking, different ways of living. And, you know, his buildings did that in a way that very few other people have ever done.
Quite literally changing the landscape. Alex, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks so much for this. It was great chatting with you about your insights, especially someone who has had the pleasure of meeting him many times.
Thank you, Renee.
Take care. That's Alex Bozikovic, an architecture critic with the Globe and Mail.